This video is brought to you by Incogni. Hello friends, my name is JJ, and if there is one thing I am consistently against, it is conspiracy theories. A big part of my worldview is that people should prioritize accumulating fact-based knowledge and indeed have respect for the difficulty of accumulating fact-based knowledge. The older I get, the more I realize that this world of ours is a very complicated place, and understanding that complexity is never going to be easy. The best you can do is hope to find satisfaction in the small victories of gradual learning, and hope to go to bed every night a tiny bit better informed than you were when you woke up. A lot of people do not like this slow, lifelong assignment, however. They want to get to the big answers as quickly as possible. They want to feel engorged with the smug self-satisfaction of being smarter than everyone around them, even those dweebs who spend all of their time reading boring books and lame newspapers all day. And this is what the conspiratorial mindset exists to do when you choose to believe the world is run by deliberately wicked elites who mask their tracks with elaborate webs of lies. You have given yourself a pretext to abandon difficult learning in favor of a much faster, easier, and more fun form of learning, where all the complexities of our world can be explained away with a few simple cliches. You know, stuff like, the mainstream media is just propaganda. The big corporations are trying to kill us. The government wants us to be slaves. Everyone in a position of power hates the public. Don't believe anything they tell you. And then you just come up with some group to be the they, and bingo bango, no need to ever learn much of anything ever again. Now, sadly, conspiratorial thinking is very much on the rise these days. People offer a lot of different explanations of why this is, with the most popular, of course, being that it is very easy to spread around nonsense in the digital age. But ironically enough, it is also the case that elites themselves are encouraging us to believe in conspiracy theories like never before. We have seen a distressing rise in conspiracy-brained politicians, conspiracy-brained billionaire CEOs, conspiracy-brained social media superstars and celebrities, even conspiracy-brained journalists. And that last category is what I want to talk about today, because I think it is not asking a lot for people who are on the front lines of distributing facts about our world to be aggressively pushing back against the rise of astonishingly fact-free conspiracy theories, but instead, in an effort to look cool and create easily shareable, clickable content, too often respectable news outlets wind up churning out stuff that exists to excuse, validate, or rationalize this rise in conspiratorial thinking. The most egregious example comes when the press pushes a line that I'm sure you've heard many times before. Some conspiracy theories have turned out to be true. This is unto itself a very vapid cliche that a certain sort of person likes to say to sound smart. It has a certain naughty contrarian energy to it, and people like to believe that things with naughty contrarian energy are automatically true, but they are not. And this idea that some conspiracy theories have been proven to be true is a bad and dangerous idea, because it encourages us to be more open-minded about conspiracy theories, and nothing good comes of that. So today, I thought we would look at some articles on some popular websites that purport to list conspiracy theories that turned out to be real, and we can see if there is any truth whatsoever to these claims. But first, a word from today's video sponsor, Incogni. Hello, friends. So today we are talking about conspiracy theories, but I will tell you one conspiracy that's no theory: companies selling your personal information online. Because most of us just stumble and bumble our way through life, blindly offering up whatever any random website asks of us, a distressing lot of the information that we submit on the internet winds up being sold to companies who use it to harass us with various scams and hustles. For example, if you've ever gotten one of those annoying texts user calls claiming you have a missing UPS parcel. That's often a pretty good sign that your personal data has been obtained by some sort of professional scam consortium. But fear not, our pals at Incogni can help alleviate such petty annoyances. Their app sends out form letters to their vast Rolodex of data brokerage firms asking them to delete whatever info they have on you, and under the laws of most Western countries, the firms are legally obligated to comply. Look, I'm up to 75 successful deletion requests. So don't delay, let Incogni help cut back the annoyances in your life, as it has for mine, and if you use the promo code JJMCC, you can get 60% off an annual plan. Incogni, protect your identity online. So to begin, let us look at this 2023 article entitled 12 Conspiracy Theories That Actually Turned Out to Be True, published in that eminent journal of bourgeois respectability, Reader's Digest. Now, before we get into the article, it is probably worth defining what exactly a conspiracy theory even is, but this is not too difficult. A conspiracy theory is basically just a theory that asserts the existence of a conspiracy. Two of the most notorious conspiracy theories of our time, for example, the idea that Jews secretly run the world for their own benefit, or that the Earth is flat, but there is a cover-up to deny this, are specific claims purporting the existence of a specific conspiracy. They are easily identifiable and, sadly, quite popular theories about conspiracies. Okay, and now let us look at the conspiracy theories that were apparently proven true in the eyes of Reader's Digest. Okay, so the way this article is organized is we have things listed as conspiracies, and then we have the truth. And like literally none of the things listed as conspiracies are actual conspiracy theories. They're just a bunch of times that government or big business did scandalous or offensive things. The article purposely seeks to blur the line between a run-of-the-mill scheme or plot and a scheme or plot that only the most crazy conspiracy theorists ever believed in. For example, one of the conspiracies listed is that for decades, tobacco companies buried evidence that smoking is deadly. And okay, yeah, that's broadly true. It has now been proven pretty comprehensively that Big Tobacco did indeed know the harm of their products for a very long time. My pal Knowing Better has a very great video on this. But at the same time, Knowing Better's video also does a good job of illustrating how the link between smoking and lung cancer was pretty widely publicized as soon as it was known, including in Reader's Digest itself. This was in the early 1950s. And from that point on, the tobacco companies were fighting an increasingly uphill battle against a stronger and stronger scientific consensus that was becoming more and more well-known. In other words, you could argue that the tobacco companies were engaged in a conspiracy to the extent that they were lying in their advertisements about how their cigarettes had safety filters or whatever. But there was no conspiracy theory about this. Beginning in the 1950s, the American government and medical establishment spent decades warning about the dangers of smoking. They told people not to trust the cigarette companies and spent decades trying to undermine them with advertising bans and warning labels grounded in scientific fact. So characterizing the war against Big Tobacco as a conspiracy theory that was proven true insults the credentials of highly credible cancer researchers by implying that they were once treated as raving lunatics who nobody took seriously. And that was never the case. All right, now how about this conspiracy? The Canadian government was so paranoid about homosexuality that it developed a gaydar machine. I talked about this a bit in one of my Canadian iceberg videos. Up until the mid-1990s, the Canadian government had an open policy of discriminating against homosexuals for jobs in the federal civil service. They would try not to hire any, and if they accidentally did, they would be fired once they were found out. According to a recent class action lawsuit, between 1955 and 1996, around 9,000 Canadian government workers lost their jobs for being gay. And for a time in the 50s and 60s, the government used a preposterous machine to detect homosexuality by measuring how much an employee's pupils dilated when shown sexy gay pictures. So clearly, the Canadian government was engaged in some sort of organized scheme to discriminate against gay people, and the so-called fruit machine was part of this. But I don't know if this even rises to the level of a conspiracy, as opposed to just a policy. And there was never really a theory about it either, because gay Canadians of that time were very aware that they were being actively discriminated against. Likewise, there was never much in the way of public rumors about the fruit machine in particular. Its existence didn't become widespread knowledge until a book came out in the 80s with a chapter on it. And even then, the book itself noted that the machine was never widely used because, of course, it was based on quack science and didn't work. So what we're left with is not a conspiracy theory that was proven true, but just a weird and obscure government program that was part of a popular agenda of discrimination against an unpopular minority group. All right, and now how about this article from our old pals at Mental Floss? 6 conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. This one starts off with a great American classic, the Roswell crash in New Mexico. And apparently the conspiracy theory that was proven true was it wasn't a weather balloon that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. And right away we see some carefully worded weasel language. As anyone well-versed in American conspiracy culture knows, the thesis of the Roswell conspiracy theory is that an alien spacecraft crashed at a ranch in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, and the government has been covering this up for the last 70 years. This is probably like one of the top 3 conspiracy theories in American culture. It's been featured in countless American TV shows and movies and video games and toys. It's even a major part of Roswell's tourism industry. But notice the careful way that the Mental Floss guy describes the Roswell conspiracy that was supposedly proven true. It wasn't a weather balloon that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. He does this because this is the only way you can argue that anything about the Roswell conspiracy theory turned out to be true. When the mysterious Roswell crash happened in 1947, the US Air Force at the time said that the thing that crashed was just a harmless weather balloon, but as the Mental Floss guy notes, many years later, the Air Force conducted an internal investigation and concluded that the thing that crashed was actually a different kind of balloon that was part of a top-secret program to spy on the Russians. It had originated from an Air Force base located 100 miles west of Roswell, and its remains had initially simply been misidentified rather than consciously covered up. And the ensuing report that the Mental Floss guy helpfully links to goes out of its way to emphasize that the Air Force research found absolutely no indication that what happened near Roswell in 1947 involved any type of extraterrestrial spacecraft, and it spends a fair bit of time debunking the specific claims of the alien conspiracy theories. I mean, I guess you're free to say that maybe this report is itself part of the conspiracy, but in any case, nothing substantial about the actual Roswell conspiracy theory has been proven true. The Mental Floss guy basically just created a much more mild and restrained version of the Roswell conspiracy theory, and then proved that that was true. And even then, not really, because the Air Force still denies that they were ever covering up anything in the first place. Okay, and now how about this conspiracy theory? People who are chipped can be tracked by satellites. This is another very carefully, weaselly worded phrase that is clearly supposed to evoke the popular conspiracy theory about the government putting microchips inside of you to monitor you or control you or whatever. This is another one of the great iconic American conspiracy theories that, of course, got disturbing new life during the COVID pandemic when people were saying that the vaccines were the way that the government was going to get the chips inside of you. But once again, our author is not claiming to have found evidence proving that that actually existing conspiracy theory is true, but instead claims to have found evidence proving a different claim is true that kinda sorta resembles the more popular one. In this case, he notes that current research suggests that at some point in the future, it might be possible to put tracking chips in people, something that was dismissed as a paranoid disorder just a few decades ago. But what an absurd thing to say. A wild allegation that was rightfully dismissed as paranoid ramblings has now turned out to be true because that technology might theoretically exist someday? What? What? All right, and here's one more article for us to ponder from the popular science news blog, IFL Science. 4 conspiracy theories that turned out to be completely true. Once again, all of the entries on this are really dumb, but here is an illustrative example of one of the supposed conspiracy theories that turned out to be completely true. Free healthcare is a trick to let the government poison you. Okay, so have you ever heard anyone, even your most nutcase paranoid friend, make this weirdly specific claim? Free healthcare is a trick to let the government poison you. I guess this seems sort of vaguely inspired by the Sarah Palin era claim that Obamacare would lead to healthcare rationing, which would lead to death panels, wherein big government would decide whether you've lived long enough or something. But that is obviously substantially different from claiming that the government wants to poison you, which shows that, once again, our author is altering a conspiracy theory to fit the evidence that she has, rather than doing what the headline purports, which is providing evidence to prove a conspiracy theory. All right, but whatever. So how does free healthcare prove that the government is trying to poison us? The evidence offered is the Tuskegee syphilis study, which was a notoriously inhumane experiment that the US Department of Health conducted with support from Tuskegee University on a couple hundred poor black men for several decades, beginning in 1932. The test was to study the long-term effects of syphilis on the body, which is a terrible disease that there was no cure for at the time. Some of the poor black men they recruited had syphilis, and some didn't, so it was a compare and contrast sort of thing. And in exchange for participating in this long-term study, the participants were given promises of free transportation to and from hospitals, free hot lunches, free medical treatments for ailments other than syphilis, and free burial. Now, in the 1940s, penicillin was invented, which cures syphilis, but for the purposes of the experiment, this information was withheld from the participants, along with other practical information about syphilis that would have been incredibly valuable for them to know. And because of the amount of preventable death and suffering that it inflicted upon so many underprivileged men, the Tuskegee experiment is now widely regarded as one of the great crimes of American history. And after the experiment ended in the early 1970s, and news about it went public, there was a big class action lawsuit with millions of dollars given to the survivors. It was really a huge scandal.
The United States government did something that was wrong, deeply, profoundly, morally wrong.
And these days, it is often cited as an example of why some African Americans are paranoid about the government and medical experiments and even the US healthcare system in general. But in terms of proving any conspiracy theory true, it seems to me that this example has the cause and effect relationship completely backwards. If some black people today have conspiracy theories about the American public healthcare system, it could be in part because during the 1970s, there was a much publicized story about a cruel, government-backed medical experiment performed on innocent black people. But the reality of the Tuskegee experiment does not prove any conspiracy theories of the past true, because there were no conspiracy theories about the Tuskegee experiment. The Tuskegee experiment is relevant in American conspiracy theory culture because it provided a pretext for creating new conspiracy theories in the future. Saying the Tuskegee experiment provides a rational basis for black people to distrust the government is a plausible argument, but it is a vastly different argument than saying the Tuskegee experiment proves that conspiracy theories are sometimes true. The first argument is a bit excessively paranoid in my opinion, but there is a logic to it. The second argument, by contrast, is just deeply irresponsible. It encourages us to be credulous about people making wild allegations without evidence today, simply because bad things happened in the past, which is a pretty clear-cut, logical fallacy. And in any case, the idea that the Tuskegee experiment was primarily about free healthcare or poisoning is an extreme stretch, and only serves to give cover to the death panel set today. And that basically gets to my big problem with these sorts of articles. What do they even exist to do? What exactly is being done when a writer at some respectable news outlet or website confidently writes an article telling us that some conspiracy theories turned out to be true? Is the reader learning any useful history? Not really, because as we've seen in these articles, the writers just take historical facts and try to twist them to fit into a predetermined narrative that kinda sorta resembles a famous American conspiracy theory. Is the reader gaining any useful perspective on history? No, again, because these articles tend to discuss such a random scattershot of different topics that it is hard to analyze them as a coherent whole. No, the only reason why these articles exist is to convince the reader that believing in conspiracy theories is somehow good, actually. These articles disingenuously claim to provide persuasive evidence that conspiracy theories have often been proven true, thereby implying that society's dominant understanding of conspiracy theories, namely that they are the unsubstantiated ravings of lunatics, is somehow false. The reader is encouraged to second-guess his prior judgment of conspiracy theories, and presumably become more open-minded about new conspiracy theories that he encounters in the future, because, you know, some of the conspiracy theories of the past were proven true. This is dishonest, unethical, and dangerous. Conspiracy theories are the work of lazy people who cannot be bothered to learn actual facts about the world, so they just make up fantasy nonsense to make themselves feel smart. The most wild ones are often the product of barely disguised bigotries or untreated mental illness. They are by definition not theories that are informed by observable reality. They are theories that begin with conclusions and then work backwards to prove those conclusions with facts that are either carefully cherry-picked and presented disingenuously, or more often than not, just made up altogether. This style of thinking is extremely harmful in a deliberative democracy. It undermines the importance of informed opinion and rational argument, and instead encourages people to become most comfortable with their irrational feelings and most ill-informed biases. And it's no great mystery as to what sort of cultural toll this sort of stuff takes if allowed to metastasize. I mean, just look around you. So in conclusion, I think it is important not just that we stand opposed to people who traffic in conspiracy theories directly, but also oppose those people who try to earn some sort of weird contrarian cred by either excusing, apologizing, or justifying conspiracy theories and presenting them as something other than what they are. So let me know what you guys think about all of this. Have you ever seen an article or video make an extremely dubious claim about why a popular conspiracy theory is actually true? Do you think conspiracy theories serve any useful function at all? Well, let me know in the comments, and I will see you next week.